Hi there, Emily Midgett here with you today on the Hero Arts channel, sharing a video on how to ground your stamped scenes with some quick ink blending. My creative mind usually works in more abstract patterns and images, so creating simple scenes on my card fronts has been something that I struggle with. One of the ways that I have found that I can create a scene is to ground the stamped images with a blended area. Instead of having to fill the entire card front with different elements for your scene, you can limit your canvas by adding a small masked area to fill with your scenic elements. For today's video, I am combining the new hot air blooms with some easy masked blending to create a sky, helping to ground my floral hot air balloon. Let's get started with the details. I began by stamping and die cutting several images from the Hot Air Bloom stamp set from the 2019 Hero Arts catalog, including the large balloon, a few clouds, and some trailing bunting. I stamped them onto some Copic-friendly white cardstock using intense black ink, which is also Copic-friendly, then die cut them with the coordinating frame cuts. Because this is such a detailed image, I wanted to keep the Copic coloring relatively simple to avoid spending too much time fussing and perfecting each individual flower. To do this, I chose two Copic markers for each different flower shape, one light marker and one slightly darker. There are 2 or 3 main flower shapes, and I tried to remain consistent by keeping each floral shape a particular color, adding very subtle shading to the center of each flower to cut down on the amount of time that I spent coloring. I could easily spend hours coloring this image, fussing over it and trying to make sure that the coloring was perfect, but that's not a realistic possibility most of the time, and such small images don't really require a huge amount of attention to shading. Sometimes simple just works better. For the clouds, I tried to keep the shading simple, allowing the white of the cardstock to show through, so I added a bit of pale gray around the edges, then used my colorless blender to blend out the harsh lines. Adding a hint of shadow helps to add a bit of dimension to these mostly white clouds. Once I had completed my Copic coloring, it was time to work on the background. I began by creating a masked area using Post-it notes, but you could also do this by using some masking tape and scratch paper. I used my gridded mat to guide me to make sure that the lines were straight across, then pressed down on each mask to ensure that the adhesive had a good seal and wouldn't pop up as I was ink blending. Once I had my masks in place, I began by using some blending brushes to add a strip of dusty blue ink in roughly the center of my open area and at a diagonal. I also added some stonewash ink on either side of the dusty blue, adding some interest to what would otherwise be a flat sky. The Hero Arts inks blend very nicely as their formulation allows for some smoothing as they dry. Pulling the masking paper up is like watching magic happen. In one swift motion, you have a nice clean background with a strip of bright blue sky in the center. Once the blending had been completed, it was time to add my die cuts and a greeting. I placed my Copic colored die cuts roughly where I wanted them to be adhered, then determined my sentiment placement. I added a sentiment from the new Mix and Match Complement stamp set using my MISTI for perfect placement, and the intense black dye ink for a nice crisp greeting. After my sentiment had been added, I used foam tape to adhere my die cuts to the card front, allowing one edge of the balloon to hang over the edge. Because the sentiment was slightly to the left on the card front, allowing some of the main image to hang over the edge of the opposite side and be trimmed off helps to fill the scene out across the entire card front, rather than just a small, potentially uneven cluster in the center. The final touch was to add a few white drops to further fill out any gaps that had been created on the card front. Well, I hope you've enjoyed my project today. If creating scenes is something with which you've struggled, I hope this video helps you to see how simple it can be to create a quick scene by adding a small masked background. If you like this video, please give us a thumbs up, and to see more of the details on the products used, head over to the Hero Arts blog. Thanks so much for watching, and have a marvelous day!